Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
It is time for RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147 Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, December 3rd, and I am Lyndsey Smith, your host for Tuesdays with Lyndsey. See? Tuesday, Lyndsey, Tuesdays with Lyndsey. Here we go. Great show lined up for you today. I'm super excited about what I've got in store for you. I will warn you, though, I'm going to take you down some pretty serious topics, and these are super important. And one is agronomy based, and one is about your farm business. And it's a tough conversation. It's about having tough conversations, but I think it is incredibly important right now because, ooh, doggy, things are tough out there, and it is really important that we do what we can, of course, to keep our businesses going, keep our businesses healthy. And so Eric Olsen with MNP, he's going to join me later in the show to talk about what to do if you feel like financially you're probably not in a great place, or perhaps the bank is letting you know that, you know, perhaps they're calling in loans, perhaps they're telling you no for certain things, or perhaps it's just time for you to do some restructuring and get on more solid footing financially. It's a tough conversation, but it's a super important one. So join me later in the show for my discussion with Eric Olsen on that one. I did mention rotation. Big topic we had on the Agronomists just a few weeks ago. Dr. Dave Hooker and Lana Shaw joined me for the Agronomists. We had a fantastic conversation about not just the importance of rotation. I think everybody sort of fundamentally understands that, you know, as you move through your cropping system, adding in another crop, going cereal broadleaf is important. But I wanted to dig into sort of the why. And there are several factors to that why, and which is the fascinating part for me as a total agronomy geek. But it really does come down to not just what happens with soil microbes, but it happens to change what happens above ground, let's say with disease risk or insect pressure. It also impacts rooting depth and access to nutrients and moisture. But, and here's a really key part of our conversation, it's not just other crops in rotation. It actually does matter which other crops are in rotation. So yes, having a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6 crop rotation does offer benefits, but we don't actually know exactly sort of which crop after which really gives the best benefit. But we have a bit of that data, but not all of that data. But that is something we talk about. We talk about why the crop rotation adds some stability to yield. So it doesn't always mean more yield per se, but having a complex crop rotation. So for Ontario, that means having winter wheat in the rotation. For Western Canada, it likely means, you know, keeping canola 1 and 3 or keeping soybeans 1 and 3, those sorts of ideas. That having a rotation like that actually adds, and I know the word gets overused, but it's really important, resiliency, yield resiliency. So in a tough year, like a drought year or a disease year, you actually end up not losing as much in those years. And that's why sometimes it can be hard to quantify the value of rotation. So check that out. End of the show, Dr. Dave Hooker, Lana Shaw are going to join me for a snippet of that. And of course, we had a show last night as well. If any of you followed along on the Agronomists last night, you can do that on YouTube, X, or you can just go to realagriculture.com/agronomists at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the show goes live on the site as well. My computer decided it was tired, and just before the end of the show, we had about 10 minutes left to go, my laptop completely crashed. So thank you to producer Jay for stepping in. Jay Strovey, he puts this show together. He, of course, produces the Agronomists when we're live. He is the backbone of this team, let me tell you. And he stepped in and asked the questions and kept the conversation going with Ken Kura and Mike Palmier. I said it wrong last night. I apologize, Mike. Anyway, so you can check that one out as well. We talked about the people side of agronomy. So thank you to Jay and to my guests, Ken and to Mike. It was a lot of fun, even if I did get kicked off early. Maybe the universe was telling me something. It was time to go to bed. Maybe. Okay. Also on the show today, my colleague Bern Tobin, as he does every year, headed to a hotel somewhere in the Toronto airport vicinity for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture's AGM. This is, of course, where the OFA puts forward its resolutions. It's also where they nominate their board. And so happy to have on Drew Spoelstra. He has been re-elected as president of OFA. He will hop on just after the break with Bern Tobin to talk about what's ahead for that. And then also on today's show, I've got Mike Schreiner. So Mike is the Green Party lead here in Ontario. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, Green Party is all environmental. What do they have to do with agriculture? Well, in Ontario, we are actually incredibly blessed. And yes, I say blessed because I think a diversity of opinions is a good thing. But the Green Party in Ontario does a phenomenal job acting essentially as another member of the opposition and really challenges the Ford government on a lot of files. And if you're in Ontario or if you've been following Ontario politics, there have been several sort of loggerheads that have come up. We've had the Greenbelt scandal. We've had discussions about solar energy. We've had all sorts of different things that, of course, the government perhaps has sided with, maybe not the best interests of agriculture in mind. And that's up for discussion. So Bern Tobin also brings you that discussion with the Green Party as well. So stick around for that. All right. If you've got feedback on today's show or any of the shows that we do, you can give us a call, 855-776-6147, or zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or find me on Blue Sky, Real Loud Lyndsey on Blue Sky. It is, I got to tell you, Twitter, yeah, X, whatever. It's still there. It is very noisy. It is too many ads. I switched. I'm still on Twitter, but I'm discovering Blue Sky, and you know what? It's kind of nice. It's like Twitter in the early days. So if you're on Blue Sky, find me there. Real Loud Lyndsey. That's Lyndsey. All right, don't bore us. Let's get to the chorus. It's time to take a break, and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
At Vatterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vatterstad, we look forward to growing together.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and with advancements in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and precision agriculture, we're moving into a new era of innovation. Join agriculture industry leaders in Ottawa December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, that's today, tomorrow, and the next day, to explore the future of agriculture and how Canada can capitalize on its opportunity to be a global agricultural leader. Visit growcanadaconference.ca to register. And if you are there, I will be there tonight for the reception, and I'll be there all day tomorrow covering the conference. So we'll have some of that right here on Real Ag coming up in the coming days. But now let's hop to Burnt Tobin's conversation with newly elected president of OFA, Drew Spoelstra.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to Real Agriculture. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture held its annual general meeting this week, and as part of the proceedings, the Provincial Farm Lobby Organization elects a president to lead it through the new year, and the OFA Executive Committee has elected Binbrook, Ontario farmer Drew Spoelstra as its leader for 2025. Spoelstra returns for his second year as president, and he joins me now. Congratulations, Drew.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Hey, now, as I noted, last year was your first year leading the organization, and as you look back on 2024, what were some of the highlights in your first year as president?
Well, it was a busy year. There's lots of things on Ontario agriculture always to talk about and get out and see members, and I had a good opportunity to get around to different parts of the province, see different areas, see what's going on, see what their concerns are, and discuss ways how we can move the organization forward and support the agriculture industry. So lots of challenges out there, certainly around land use challenges and concerns. Hydro infrastructure is certainly a challenge in southwestern parts of the province. Other parts, eastern Ontario's got challenges with railways and drainage, and northern Ontario's got challenges with things like access to crown land and other things. So there's lots of things to deal with right around the province, and we've got a good team to work towards finding some solutions here going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of the challenges, and I'm going to throw in, Mr. Trump's tariff intentions and the impact from OFA's perspective. How do you view the landscape heading into 2025?
Well, you mentioned the Trump issues and the tariff issues that might be coming forward here on agriculture, and certainly while, the provincial organization may not be leading the efforts, we'll certainly be feeding into the conversations, whether it's at CFA or at different levels of government. So we need to be prepared as best we can for what's going to come. We're going to try and be preventative when it comes to dealing with these things, or proactive, I should say, not preventative, dealing with some of these issues. And there's a number of other things that we continue to deal with. I mean, there's always land use concerns that remain. The hydro infrastructure piece is a big one. We're working to develop some good policies around agriculture impact assessments and how we can look at farmland in different ways going forward, and trying to save the best farmland we have to continue to farm. So there's lots of priorities certainly on our plate, and we're going to get started here in the next couple of days again, and get back to work after the annual meeting.
Let's dig into a couple more of these before I let you go. You talked about farmland preservation. It was a big topic at the meeting this week. The Ford government's plans for the Green Belt, and I guess the fight over the Wilmot industrial development of farmland near Kitchener, are troublesome topics for Ontario agriculture. What kind of movement would you like to see here in 2025?
Well, certainly we've been working over the course of the last year and a little longer than that, but to build relationships with provincial representatives, and we're having good opportunities now, I think, to chat with folks about what we'd like to see in terms of better urban planning going forward, and ensuring that we're building our communities up instead of out, that we're limiting the damage when it comes to eating up more farmland for housing developments and other uses as well. So it's not just about housing. There's lots of other uses and things we're trying to turn farmland into, and we maintain our position that prime agriculture land is best suited for farming, and that this is part of the breadbasket of the world, and we continue to produce a lot of high quality food here in Ontario, and we want to be able to maintain our production systems and keep our farmers strong here in the province. So there's lots of discussions to be had, and we'll keep having those going forward.
There was a lot of focus on affordable energy this week. Stephen Lecce, Ontario's Minister of Energy and Electrification, addressed the meeting this morning. You also had a robust panel discussion. Hydro infrastructure was a big topic. What needs to happen here?
Yeah, for sure. There's always a struggle when it comes to things like affordable energy, making sure that, A, it's affordable, B, accessible, and C, reliable. And so, our businesses are big. They're expanding across much of the province. We need access to reliable, affordable energy. And, that was the main focus of our day this morning and our conversation, the panel discussion with the folks around the panel, and of course the ministers addressing the meeting this morning as well. So we're having constant conversations with their team on how we can do those things, that we're taking an all the above approach when it comes to hydro or power generation in this province. And that, going forward, they're going to put some restrictions on land use to make sure that we're utilizing our land to its best capacity. And we'll continue the conversations too on line placement and infrastructure projects and how they can better support farmland preservation. So lots of work to continue on with that ministry as well. And really happy that we were able to have Minister Lecce and Oosterhoff address the delegates there this morning, and we'll keep that conversation going as well.
Hey, let's wrap it up with a little provincial election talk here. Premier Ford has been, working to position his party for a 2025 election, and we had representatives from opposition parties speak at OFA convention this week. Everybody's jockeying for position. From an election perspective, what are you looking to hear from the government and the opposition?
Yeah, I think it goes back to farmland preservation again, and we want to hear more from everyone that's involved in at Queen's Park and represent people across the province. We want to hear them talking about farmland preservation and how important it is to continue to grow food here in Ontario, to be produced locally, to support our farm members and grow our agriculture business. There's a lot of support out there for the Grow Ontario strategy, and I think putting some of the right things in place to support that strategy is going to be important going forward. And we're really happy to support that and continue to work with the government. So as we head into what could be an election cycle next year, we're going to keep having those conversations and keep trying to get certainly some of our urban MPPs to talk about agriculture, but of course the ones out in the rural areas as well.
Well, Drew, it has been a busy week, sir. We wish you good luck in 2025, and we appreciate you making some time for Real Agriculture.
You bet. Thanks so much.
We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
Here's what Wheat Pete's word on RealAgriculture.com is all about in under 30 seconds.
It's wheat time. I love wheat time. I love wheat. Get that sulfur on. Get that seeding rate right. Get that nitrogen on your wheat right. Get that protein. Know your variety. Know when you need to put fungicides on. Pick your product. Pick your rate. Do the right job. Get this wheat crop right. Have a nice day. Grow amazing wheat.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. This segment is brought to you by the next generation of Brandt U-Trough augers. They are here. They can move up to 9,000 bushels per hour, even in the harshest conditions. Visit your local Brandt dealer today. I'm Lyndsey Smith with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio, and joining me now it's Eric Olsen. He's the national leader of the Farm Management Consulting arm of MNP. Welcome here, Eric.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsey.
All right, we're going to talk a very large topic, a very serious topic, but I hope one that we can put some positive things around. Let's talk a little bit about, well, current finances, let's say, and maybe future finances. How do we broach the subject of perhaps feeling like financially maybe things are getting a little rough? Is there anything we can do about it? So let's start with maybe framing this particular topic of, perhaps trying to dig into our finances and see where maybe we've gone a bit awry.
It's a great question. We right now, and maybe I'll talk about where we're at in terms of income and where our clients are at. We've just come out of some of probably the best prices that's been seen in any generation for our grain side. But we have seen interest rates have moved up now, and we're now starting to see those effects as well. It took a few years before that really hit most clients. Some had interest rates locked in, and it takes a minute to really feel that on your operations. So we've seen that shift, and we've seen incomes not keep up with it. In fact, incomes dropping while interest rates were going up. So we do have some clients that have to make some hard decisions and might have to make some changes in their operation going forward. On the positive side, we see right now when I see our clients having problems because of the change in operations and values of land. Our clients have equity, so they have something to work with to make these changes. If I go back to the 80s when we talked about the real debt crisis in agriculture, farmers were bankrupt. They had more liabilities than they have assets. Right now, what they have in most cases is they have cash flow issues, so they're more insolvent. So that's the big issue for our clients today. And they have options. It's just, how they want to work with those options.
Mm-hmm. So let's unpack that a little bit. Equity obviously is one of those things where, well, there's a lot you can do with equity, but there's some things you can't. You can't eat equity. You still need to service debt, but that is where, for some farmers, that is becoming more and more difficult as terms come up, as loans have to be renewed. Interest rates are not what they were a couple of years ago. And certainly, commodity prices have come down, maybe input prices have stayed higher. That profitability equation just doesn't look the same right now. For farms that are perhaps sitting down or on the verge of perhaps having to renew some things, and they're starting to take a look at this debt servicing, how do you know what you can make work? Where would you start on that balance sheet and in those numbers?
The first thing, and it's the leading indicator of how you're doing is net income, obviously on the farm, but specifically when we're talking debt, it's your repayment ratio. And really what a repayment ratio is, if you go to the bottom of a financial statement, you take your net income, you add back in depreciation or amortization, you take out what your family spends, you add back in interest, and then you divide that by interest and principal. And obviously, depending on the industry, you would like to see that ratio in 1 point. In dairy, it's a little tighter because of the nature of their income. It's flatter or has less volatility. But, we like to see 1.25 to upwards to 2. Okay. So that means you would have 2 times the amount of money that you needed to repay. When that starts getting close to 1 or it's under 1, then that starts eroding your current ratio. When I say current ratio, it's your current assets minus your current liabilities. So it's your working capital. And you can do that for a period of time, because unfortunately in the commodity business, sometimes we have a bad crop and we have a loss year. So we have to fall back on those current assets or that working capital. But over the long term, if it continues to happen, that's when you get in trouble, and that's when you become insolvent. You can't pay your bills. And that's usually when the bank starts having those hard conversations with you.
Mm-hmm. So now they are very difficult conversations. And for some people, they've maybe never had those before, because you're right. We've had some pretty good times. We've had some pretty affordable money, cheap money even. And so for many in their careers, this might be one of the first real cash crunches they've come into. Or for some others, this might be, just a return to sort of how they farmed in the past, as far as maybe recognizing that margins are tight. How then, if you recognize that, your next conversation may be somewhat uncomfortable when it comes to servicing that debt, how can farms and farm businesses sort of prepare for that kind of meeting, that kind of conversation?
They have to understand their numbers. And I'm hoping, so we would hope that they have accrual financial statements that allows them to actually understand the profitability on a year-to-year basis on their farm, and to actually have good conversations with their accountants about it. That is how their farm's seen by the bank. So to discount what you get from your accountant and say, well, that's not really how the farm isn't right. That's how the bank reads you in the world. So that's the first thing, is understand your finances and where you are. And you're going to hear this from me a lot, is probably look out a little bit, do a little bit of budgeting, understand what it looks like for next year, and see if you're still short of money. Probably then you need to do some things or make some changes. The other piece, I think, is, when you have those conversations with your bank, I think you need to ask them some questions and sit back and listen. And because ultimately, your financial institution wants you to be successful. From a personal level, the person you're dealing with obviously wants you to be successful. And from the banking side, if you're successful, it allows them to lend you more money, and they also make more money. So, I made a few phone calls preparing for seeing you today, and one of the things that was interesting that came up was to ask your banker and ask them as simply as, where do you see my financial position, and how does the bank view me right now in terms of my finance and risk? Some people might be scared to ask that question because it could lead to an answer they don't want to hear, but it's better to hear early than late. It allows you to make some changes. The other one that's interesting, they said, is ask them, what if you were in my position, what would you concentrate on next year in terms of farming for next year, or things that I need to work on in terms of my financial position or finances on my farm. Again, it's a sit back and listen. They'll give you some insights on how the bank is viewing you in terms of their risk portfolio or profile, I mean. Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that is a key point of where we get to, is that, banks are businesses. They have to recognize their risk exposure. They want to get paid, obviously, and that comes to that success piece, right? I mean, a successful farm or a successful business on their end means that lowers their risk, and they make their money on their interest that they're getting paid. But ultimately, at some point, a client may become too much of a risk, and when that does happen, that becomes, a very uncomfortable conversation of perhaps having to find lending elsewhere. If that's the case, how do you navigate that? Like, what are some of the first steps that you should be taking to potentially, find a new partner in lending that wants to see that success as well, that might be able to help?
One of the things I would say is look for a maybe, this might sound self-serving for someone from MNP, but an advisor, whether it's your accountant, whether it's a farm financial advisor that you might work with. We do this at MNP, but is to have someone else to go talk to say, what this is where I'm at. What are your ideas? One of the things in farming is there's a lot of emotion around the farm. You hear lots of farm business people say, farming's a business. It's not a calling, but farmers it's really important to them, and it's emotional. It's usually a family farm. It's they've been on that farm for a lot of years. So, getting a third party that's maybe not as emotional to help work through those is really important. If you're at the point, usually by that time if they're calling your loans, you're probably at an area in most of the banks called special loans. So you're dealing with someone who specializes in collections, and they're very professional, and they have outcomes they're looking for. And sometimes having someone on your court that understands that and has dealt in that world before really helps. The other piece, if you're into that position, talking to someone who's in the insolvency business. MNP has an insolvency team, and we work quite closely with them with our farm management group, because from our standpoint, we're trying to find solutions for clients. And really, that's what you want to do, is find a solution and get them restructured. Maybe there has to make some changes on the farm, but that's okay, because the goal is to continue to farm usually. And that's really what everyone wants to see out of that.
So, and I want to leave it on a positive note. This is a very difficult topic. It's not a comfortable one. And as you mentioned, it can be an incredibly emotional one. There's usually pride involved. There's legacy involved. There's all sorts of these components that are really key, that I think are very real. And I think we need to address them and be honest with ourselves that that even though hard numbers are unfeeling, there's a lot of feelings that go with these things. But you bring up the point of that restructuring, of perhaps recognizing that, things aren't good and restructuring or letting go of some things. Where do you start that process on sort of what is possible if, let's say, things are not going well, you recognize that, you want to get ahead of this? What does that look like, that path forward?
When we work with clients and look at doing that restructure, what we do is we do some budgeting. And really what you're looking at is the industry you're in and what's realistic in the industry you're in. And using prices and yields that are realistic for today. We told a lot of clients 2 years ago that probably $20 canola shouldn't be something you budget on for the next 20 years. So using, a little more conservative numbers, and then looking at the farm, and this is where it can get not nice, but the client needs to say, these are the things that I really want to do, and I really want part of my operation. So you get to choose and pick. Because again, like I told you earlier, I think a lot of our clients have equity that they're able to choose. What is this operation going to be? Maybe it's smaller at the end of the day. Maybe they have to sell off one of the industries to save the other one, and that's the one they're really passionate about. So it's a good time to make decisions. But I think getting help from a professional is really important at that point, because again, there's emotion. They'll go through things like denial, and they'll get angry. Usually, when a client gets in this position, they're mad at the bank. But really, and you have to work through those emotions because those are real, and that's fine to have those. But then you need to get down and kind of roll up your sleeves and get to work. And clients are used to doing that. The hard thing in ag is that farmers are really, I would say they're stoic. Clients will say, you get two farmers together and you talk production, they will help each other out, but they don't talk about their finances. So, my thought is that then, go to that third party that you can have that discussion with, and hopefully you have a trusted advisor you can do that with.
Mm-hmm. There's certain things you don't talk about in polite company, and money's one of them. So there you go. You're not supposed to. But I think you're absolutely right. Having someone to talk to, who understands the legalities, who understands things like your ratios and where those things would be. I think, from the position of asking the bank where you could improve or where they're worried, I think is very telling for sure. And really great advice to think about. One of the things that I often, that we hear about or we know about, nobody wants to be the one that fails, that doesn't see the farm forward. But we also sometimes hang on to things like land that's maybe not productive, or, try to have all that shiny new equipment when really we can't cash flow it when times are tougher. And I think sometimes we do have, at least right now anyway, some very hard realities we sort of have to make peace with before we can move forward. So Eric, I really do appreciate this. This is a fantastic conversation. And it's a tough one, but I think it's an important one, and I really appreciate your time today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lyndsey.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and you're going to hear from my colleague Bern Tobin and Mike Schreiner with the Green Party here in Ontario right after this.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and today I will be heading to downtown Ottawa to take in Grow Canada. And there is still time if you're in the area, or if you like those last minute trips, head on down to Ottawa. With advancements in artificial intelligence, biotech, and precision ag, we're moving into a new era of innovation. Join the ag industry in Ottawa December 3rd to 5th to explore the future of agriculture and how Canada can capitalize on its opportunity to be a global leader in agriculture. Visit growcanadaconference.ca to register now, and hopefully I will see you there. All right, as promised, we're going to hear from Green Party leader here in Ontario, Mike Schreiner. This is his conversation with Bern Tobin, recorded at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture AGM last week.
Mike, thanks for stopping by.
Oh, my pleasure. I always love spending time with farmers in Ontario. As somebody who grew up on a farm myself, I feel like, these are the folks I relate to, and try to be a strong voice for food and farming at Queen's Park.
In your breakfast meeting here this morning, you talked about the fact that you grew up in Kansas on a farm. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up on a grain and cattle farm in rural western Kansas, and moved here for love in the mid-1990s and started a couple local food businesses in Guelph, and have really been working hard in the food and farming sector my entire life. And Guelph was a perfect place to start a business like that, and I try to bring those experiences to the work I do at Queen's Park.
Yeah. Now, farming, you said, obviously the largest sector in this province, and you mentioned the need to stand up for this sector and to protect farmland. Tell us about your strategies and what your stance is on protecting farmland.
Well, we simply can't continue to lease 319 acres of farmland each and every day in Ontario. Only 0.5% of our land mass in Canada or in Ontario is prime farmland. That contributes over $50 billion to Ontario's economy. We simply cannot afford to lose it. And so I'm going to be continuing to work with farmers, putting pressure on government to permanently protect prime farmland. And I've put forward a number of proposals of how we can build homes in existing communities, how we can make land available for commercial and industrial development where we don't have to do it on prime farmland. And so I'm going to continue to push back against the Ford government's attack on farmland.
You talked about urban sprawl, Highway 413. We've had the Greenbelt issue here. I mean, what's your message to Premier Ford on behalf of farmers?
Well, I would just say that enforcing urban boundary expansions in Waterloo Region, expropriating farmland in Waterloo Region, paving over 2,000 acres of farmland with the proposed Highway 413 is going to hurt our food and farming sector. It's going to cost us jobs. It's going to reduce their ability to contribute over $50 billion to Ontario's economy. And so that's why I've put forward proposals where we can build homes that people can afford in the communities they know and love, so they don't have to pave over farmland. And it's why I've put forward proposals like, let's pay the tolls for trucks on Highway 407 to reduce gridlock so we don't have to pave over 2,000 acres of farmland to build Highway 413.
Tell us about your perspective on the Wilmot Township issue, Waterloo Region, 770 acres, industrial site. A lot to unpack in that story. A lack of transparency, farmer protests. What's your thoughts on this? No one really seems to know what's happening, and no one wants to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, well, I just think it's wrong for the Ford government not to be honest with the people of Ontario about why this land assembly is happening, why farmers' land is being taken away from them. I've met with all those farmers. I've spoken at rallies they've held. There are farms there that are multi-generational. There's a fantastic, one of my favorite dairies that makes cheese. Their land is threatened. And the farmers in the area have pointed out there are lots of other areas where the region, the province, could assemble 770 acres of land that's not prime farmland. And so the secrecy's wrong. The heavy-handed taking land away from farmers is wrong. The threat to multi-generational farms is wrong. And the fact that the government's not even being honest with us about what this land is being assembled for is why I'm going to continue to keep working with those farmers to push back against the Ford government.
You talked today as well about, there's a lot more to the Green Party's plan, than just protecting farmland. You talked about business risk management and other things that this sector, that agriculture and farmers need to be successful in Ontario.
Yeah, well, farmers have been calling for years, removing the caps on business risk management, putting in an extra $100 million to make sure the program is stable and there for farmers. And I'm thinking, think of how large the provincial budget is. Surely the government can come up with $100 million to enhance the business risk management program. They just voted yesterday they're going to spend almost $50 million ripping up bike lanes in Toronto. Like, I keep asking why rural taxpayers, why people in, southwestern Ontario or northern Ontario, why are they paying to rip up bike lanes in Toronto when infrastructure in rural parts of the province are completely underfunded?
Hey, final thought, and you ended this presentation this morning talking about the University of Guelph, obviously dear to your heart, being an MPP from Guelph, and I guess the struggles of post-secondary institutions and an institution like Guelph. You mentioned, it's a financial crisis, and it's going to impact agriculture.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sick and tired of Ontario being last in per capita funding for healthcare and for post-secondary education. It directly affects all universities, but I think for this crowd, particularly the University of Guelph, which has been so vital in training farmers and training people in the food and farming sector, in doing research to help with innovative tools that farmers are using. And if the university is going to face a financial crisis, that's going to negatively impact food and farming when it comes to educating young people and when it comes to developing the research to make sure the sector's successful and profitable.
Hey, final question. Can't let you go without asking about an election. Everybody thinks Premier Ford is priming the pump and getting things ready to go. What can we expect from the Greens when the writ is dropped? And how do you see this unfolding in the weeks and months ahead?
I just think it's wrong for the Premier to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an early election call to advance his own personal political agenda versus putting the people first. So the Ontario Greens always put people before politics. I think an early election call is wrong. It's a waste of money, and I'm going to continue to oppose that. But if the Premier is going to decide to put politics ahead of what's good for the people of Ontario, then we'll be ready.
Mike Schreiner, Green Party of Ontario leader, thank you for taking some time for Real Agriculture.
Hey, any time, and I just want to say, we have some of the best farmland in the entire world, but we absolutely have the best farmers.
We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on December 3rd. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and we are calling all Montana, Dakotas, and northern Minnesota growers. The new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities, first-in-class agronomy support, and free on-farm pickup after harvest. To learn more, visit omega-3, that's the number 3, omega3canola.com. All right, as promised, we hop now to a clip of my conversation with Dr. Dave Hooker and Lana Shaw from 2 weeks ago from the Agronomists. We talked about rotation, and where we're going to start off is this discussion of how rotation adds resiliency and how complex measuring the impact of rotation really is. Lana, when you're thinking about and you do a lot of intercropping work as well, so you are using, very complicated rotation, sometimes multiple species in a year, et cetera, and trying to gauge, some of the impacts and those sorts of things. What are some of the observations and some of the work that you do on the Southeast Research Farm that is looking at this potential of resiliency when it comes to having complex rotations, not complicated, complex?
I think one of the things that I've found talking to farmers is on an economic aspect. They'll look at what can I sell this particular crop for and what yield do I typically get versus the next one, but they really are not well able to quantify what effect a pea crop is having on the wheat crop that comes after it, or a canola crop that's coming after wheat, or those differences in profitability. And it could be a difference in that there's less disease pressure or less insect pressure, that they're required less to spray with certain pesticides. And that was a really hard thing when we were doing rotational trials, is we were trying to treat everything pretty much the same. Once in a while we'd have to go spray for flea beetles or something, but we couldn't, in those small plots, really control for some of those things that were you would have some larger scale impacts. But I don't think we can really underestimate the effect of those long-term rotations on having a more stable agriculture system that doesn't require us to be intervening all the time. I've likened this to a two-legged stool when people are growing 2-year crop rotations. And they're sitting on a two-legged stool asking us to help them sit on a two-legged stool. And I just say, you need more legs under your stool. It needs to be 3 or 4 in order to be more stable. And it's not my job to help you to sit. It shouldn't be my job to help you sit on a two-legged stool. It's our job to help put another leg under it.
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent analogy. Yes, I'd rather sit on a 3 or a 4 than balance on a 2. Sometimes it works, right? And sometimes you fall. So there you go. Now, Dave, I think Lana's explained it well, that when you are doing plot research, you do try to control for the variables. And so how difficult is it to tease out the rotational effect when you're looking at this data versus other impacts potentially?
Yeah. Well, these long-term trials, they really require a team, an administrative team, to make the best decisions, because if a change is made, we have to really stick with that change, with a particular practice for a long time, or else we're not sure what is affecting, the system or the trends. So that's kind of the most difficult part of these long-term trials, is they have to be set up correctly and make a hard decision. And really, we can't make any significant changes for, a number of years. But if something isn't working out in terms, like a particular tillage practice or something like that, I am a strong believer in making that change and not going any further with it, something that does not work. These long-term trials, they're replicated. So we have 4 replicates, and each crop phase, let's say in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation, those phases are repeated across the trial. So that rotation is represented in every crop phase every year. So we have, like in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation, we have corn in that corn, soybean, wheat rotation. We have soybean right beside it in another corn, soybean, wheat rotation that's offset, in that phase. And so it gets really complicated in a hurry. But with that, we can answer a lot of questions too.
Dave, I have a question, because you used a word, and I think I know it, but I think it's important. And it's not equilibrium, but it's sort of equilibrium. But it's this idea, because sometimes this gets challenged sometimes in trials, is that if you're going to change a practice, you have to do it for a long time. And we see this in cover crops. We see this in that yield drag, or whatever the case may be, or manure use. You have to do it long enough for your soil to basically sort of adapt to that being the new normal. So explain that to me.
Yeah, some of the changes that we can make in a cropping system can be major, like a crop sequence change, or a tillage. Tillage plays or has a big impact on a cropping system. So if a system is used to conventional intensive tillage, and then we switch to no-till, it will take a number of years, and research has shown 10, 15 years for that new system to equilibrate to that no-till system. And this is kind of the power of these long-term trials, or the importance of them, because if a farmer wants to make one of these decisions, those benefits, any benefit might not be realized for a number of years. And so we can, access some of these data points in a long-term trial to answer some of these long-term questions. So if we make a change now, we might not see any effect for another 10 years or so. But if we make it now, that means we will see them in 10 years rather than waiting and waiting and waiting. And it's too late. We retire and it's up to the next caretaker of the land. So these trials are very important, I think. I have a question for Lana. I know, Lana, you are the leader, I think, in Canada of intercropping. And my question for you is, how does intercropping and crop rotation, there must be a very huge interplay between the two. And I'm not sure how you would understand, a crop sequence, crop rotation, and then when you mix intercropping in with that, could you maybe describe some of that complexity?
Sure. Are we trying to square the circle? Maybe. I think, people tend to say, well, that means you're just going to grow the same crops, but with more frequency. And I always just say, no, it means we're adding in more grains for sale in total. That we could be putting flax into an area where they typically wouldn't grow flax, or oats in an area where they typically wouldn't grow oats, or peas in an area where they typically wouldn't grow peas. So, and what I've said for a long time is that we are applying the same ideas of crop rotation, but with more complexity. So you would space out each individual component in time. That's one of the main things about crop rotations that work, is that we might only grow an individual crop once every 4 years so that the pests don't have a big chance to multiply and establish very thoroughly. So those same ideas apply to a more complex crop rotation. So it's something to keep in mind when people are seeding clovers, or if they're intercropping a lot, that you could be building up root rots, or you could be, if you're using a lot of brassicas in the multi-species cover crop, if you have a lot of brassicas and then you're growing canola in your rotation, that is something to be aware of. That still counts as a brassica that will be relevant for your pests, for your flea beetles. Flea beetles love radishes. All of those things still are based in reality. It's just that the reality got more complex.
Okay. So, and Kevin's got a good point there. Now, Kevin's in the Fraser Valley. Land is too expensive, in too high demand, and too many animals to feed to experience yield drag to be feasible. And this is why, I think, Kevin, that's an excellent point as to why we have research that gets done on research farms, so that we have some guidance as to what is going to work on a farm at a field level and not be a wreck. We do it at the plot level so that we don't have wrecks out there. Yes, 150 to 200,000 per acre where Kevin is. I can't even imagine. Yeah, it's wild.
That's a lot of money. And it's, yes, we want to try to figure out how to avoid yield drag, but that's really expensive land to have your soil end up in the Fraser River or wherever it is you are. So there's that the value of that land is, it with what it is, it's also important to keep it in place and to keep that that productivity up, because protecting the soil is one of the ways we do that.
I've got to stop it there. That is it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me here on RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. We are, of course, live 4:30 Eastern every weekday, and you can catch the replay at 7 a.m. And did you know, if you are one of those podcast listeners, or if you're going to be traveling, whatever the case may be, you can find us on Spotify as well. We're also on YouTube, or head on over to realagriculture.com. realag.com/radio, and you can find all our past episodes there as well. It has been an absolute pleasure to be your host today. I am Lyndsey Smith. Find me on social media at RealAgLindsey, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Cheers, everybody.